Hello everyone and welcome to episode 9 in the CREALOGIX series on digital strategy in wealth management and private banking. Today I am joined by the original panel from the start of the series. This is Johannes, Anton and René. Hi guys and welcome back. This is the last in the series. So yeah, obviously for those that didn't join us on the first episode, I'm going to come to each of you just for a little bit of a reintroduction. So let's start with you, Johannes. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure, with pleasure. So yeah, my name is Johannes Röhrenbach. I'm at CREALOGIX since 1.5 years. I'm heading the innovation management there. That means we are out in the market, sourcing new topics, exploring them, design thinking methodologies, and therefore qualifying new innovations for the company. My background is in the management consulting and in the startup economy.
Thank you very much. And Anton, same question to yourself.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Anton. At CREALOGIX, I'm responsible for a couple of different topics, primarily sort of wealth management and data and insights. I've been with the company for a little over 10 years now. And my background is mostly the sort of wealth management, private banking industry. I'm looking forward to talking to you all today about some interesting topics.
Much, I'm looking forward to hearing those. And René, yourself.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is René. I'm the head of sales for the private banking wealth management customers at CREALOGIX. Joined a little bit more than 1 year ago. My background is mainly banking, so I was working 16 years in banks, from universal banks to private banks and family offices. In 2015, I'm on the vendor side into the tech space for banks and financial institutions.
Excellent. Looking forward to unpacking that a little bit more. I remember in the first episode we explored some of your background, so Bank J Saras and all this sort of stuff. So you bring that kind of the insider view as well as this kind of external view, which is really helpful. Okay, guys. Well, yes, the title of the show is Unlocking Digital in Wealth Management. Obviously, that's wealth management and private banking. We like to group that up into that wealth management topic. So if we have the next slide, we can go on to the first of the questions. So I thought we'd start the show today with looking at the sources of competition for wealth managers, and it's going to really frame the rest of the discussion for today. So I'm going to come to each of you and ask you, what's the biggest source of competition in traditional wealth management and private banks today? And yes, let's stay with René. René, we'll come to you then. And what do you see the biggest source of competition being at the moment?
Yeah, so I would say looking at the various options, it's still the banks. So mentioned on the top left corner. Why the banks? Because I think they have a large pool of customers and they have a lot of potential which they can raise. And because nowadays not all of the customers are treated in the way they should be, maybe. So they have their top clients, but there's a large pool of customers which can be activated. And the other thing is the traditional banks, they have the trust and the brand and the history, so that they can also now combine this with new ways of business models and maybe a targeted, segmented approach to their clients. And I think if they combine the new technological options with their existing client base and the brands they have, they can do quite well and compete with challengers and other providers in the market.
Excellent. And do you think that's started already?
Pardon, can you repeat?
Sorry, do you think that challenge has started already? Do you think they've started on this journey of breaking into that space?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent. So what you see more and more is these so-called flanking brands that established banks are starting now to bring, let's say, a second app to target, let's say, a young audience or children of their high net individuals who have maybe different needs, a different behavior, targeted to what they want. The other thing is to go into thematic offers for the younger generation, and so it's evolving now. it's more and more coming, and but it's always the pressure was not that high. It's now building up, and they start now to react. And also the people who are in charge at the banks who need to decide on this, also there's a kind of cultural change that they are opting for this.
Okay, that's very interesting. And Anton, let's come to you next and get your thoughts on this.
Sure. So I'm going to answer the question slightly differently, and not so much as what is, but what could be. And so for me, I think that's like big tech and maybe specifically some of the firms you refer to as GAFA, or some of those on the outside of this. We've already seen these sorts of deals with sort of like Alibaba and Tencent in the Asian market. And I think it's sort of a bit of a natural, and Samsung with their Samsung Money program as well, Apple with the Apple Money program. I think it's sort of a natural direction for these firms to go in. They're already very heavily involved in the sort of payment ecosystem because of the quantity of payments or the quantity of money they're dealing with. When you think about firms like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, they're quite heavily involved in who we are and who we know and our friends and our interactivities, often tagging events or taking pictures of where you are and where you've been, very similar to the sort of PFM capabilities we see in banking. So I think it's a natural thing that could or will happen. I wouldn't say they're currently the biggest competitors, but I really do think they could be. And I think the obvious advantages they have around technology and hyper personalization and the sort of journey that those firms have been on, especially when we think about things like Google or Amazon, that kind of technology revolution they've been through, and given how much of the technologies of these other firms that they power already, I think if they do decide to wade into the market, they're going to be really successful, and they're going to be some quite interesting times ahead, depending on your opinion on when or if that will happen.
Yeah, so let's pick up on that. Why do you think this hasn't happened already? What do you think has held them back?
I think timing, I think diversification is one of those things as well. I think my opinion is it's probably a matter of time rather than if and when, but I just think they're working on a lot of projects at the moment, and I think maybe out of the back of what's happened at the moment, a bit of the consolidation that's happening in the industry, sort of some of the sort of like devaluing of the startup area in the fintech space might push them to come in a bit sooner than they had planned.
Okay, that'll be really interesting. I guess that we've got Amazon accounts or whatever, and we're buying things from them already. It wouldn't take too much for them to say customers also bought and then have some sort of wealth thing. Would you see that proposition being like a nutmeg style piece, or do you think it would be something completely? What do you think they're offering?
I think they're in a position to really go into whichever one they want, I guess. I mean, I think obviously what you've seen so far from people like Samsung and Apple Money is really kind of a venture into that sort of retail space around the sort of payments and credit and lending space. As we know, the lending and credit space can be incredibly profitable. You only need to look at companies like Oak North to understand, where firms with a good digital strategy and a good approach to that business can really profit. If you look at, their profit margins compared to some of the other challenger banks or startup banks in the fintech space, there's quite a big difference in the profit margins there. So I think they could pick and choose where they go into. I would think for somebody like an Amazon or somebody like a retail, like a Google, the retail space is probably more likely, just because it has broader mass appeal, and that's obviously one big benefit that these customers have, which is the brand recognition, and as you say, the kind of like already existing account and identity information. How many of us don't have a Google account? How many of us don't have an Amazon account? How many of us don't have at least one of those? Yeah. Probably not that many people. Certainly, probably not that many people in the sort of first world area anyway. Maybe less so in some of the emerging markets. And so I think the retail space is probably where they'll start. But much like with a lot of their offerings, where you've got Amazon trying to capture the whole interactivity from buying, selling, delivery, fulfillment, video, I wouldn't be surprised if their approach is to go into all of those sections.
That would be quite a step, and it'd be interesting to sort of see it happen. You mentioned Oak North. Now I'm going to come to Johannes, because there's a number of other things that you can talk about, and ask you the question: where do you see the competition coming from?
Well, I agree to Anton. I think there's competition in all fields. There are banks entering, retail banks even starting to providing wealth management offerings. There are the big techs which are already entering. They will probably enter with much more compelling offerings in the near future. But yeah, let us focus also on the challenger case, and Oak North is an example to this, a very successful challenger startup. I think the competition arriving from challenger brands is because they have a digital DNA. They are really, really good in innovating much faster and delivering much better solutions, much better user experience with a much faster time to market than traditional players. And this is why agile methodologies, design thinking are part of the core competencies of these companies compared to traditional banks. And this is why they face this increasing growth. And I actually think 2020 is marking a turning point in this, because challenger banks, assets under management and revenues become relevant now to the global market, and we're kind of hitting the line to even increase the pressure to the rest of the marketplace.
Absolutely, thank you. So, one of the things that people often talk about when they talk about challenges is something that René touched on when he spoke about banks, which is that trust and that establishment. So one of the themes that's been going through this webinar series is how the challengers have really built trust, or how they can maintain trust in this space. If we're now thinking, okay, we're looking at the market, there's some obvious challenges. We're recording this in 2020. How do you think they're sort of going to maintain that trust going forwards, that obviously has to rival the traditional wealth managers in terms of trust?
So the challengers, it's certainly, trust is certainly, the benefit and the competitive advantage of traditional players, and this is also what they need to leverage. Challenger banks are so successful because they offer much more compelling services. Trust will be a matter of time. So the longer a startup exists, the more trust it gets. But we see it in the example of Facebook, for example, which is one of the most successful companies nowadays. But they're still, I wouldn't say Facebook is considered as a company to trust among among global society. So I think building trust is a great challenge to all challenger banks that arrive on the market. It will stay a competitive advantage to traditional players, and if they play right, they can leverage this advantage. I think that the greatest competition, greatest danger coming from challenges will be on the customer experience advantage they offer, and they are pretty successful with this. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, okay, so we've had a quite interesting opening piece there. Going on to this next is why do people like digital, right? Because it's an evolving time at the moment. We've gone from being able to do everything face to face, or most things face to face that we want to, just walk anywhere, do whatever we want. Now we're forced to be doing a lot more things digitally. So I'm going to come around to you. I'm going to start with you, René. What are the things that people like or prefer when they're managing money or investments in a digital way?
Yes, I think there are two main parts. So on the one hand, as a customer, I have my administrative stuff with my bank, and then on the other hand, I have my investment stuff. So I think what they like in digital, if already offered or soon to come, is the administrative stuff, which means to signing any documents or re-sign or update them. So in 2020s, I expect to do this in a digital way and not making an appointment, go to the brick and mortar branch, sign the paper, and then get my copy and get back home. So this is something which is related to convenience, and this I want to do on a digital channel. And I think if this is offered by the bank, people really like this. On the other hand, on the investment side, I think what's good is a certain kind of freedom. So I'm not bound to any business hours. So I can do also my investment stuff over the weekend, or I can set the pace on my own. So if I'm familiar with the investment space, I can do the things on my own at the time I want. And on the other hand, if there's not that many human beings involved, I can also profit from lower fees, why I might opt for digital. And I think these blocks are key. And then the other things are also if there's a community behind, so like we know from Amazon and so on. So if before I'm going to buy something, I look a video on YouTube or read recensions from others who did this. If this can be combined with digital financial offerings, that if there's a certain ETF or other investment where someone has invested, let's say 2-3 years ago, and there's a certain community and it has a kind of a 4 out of 5 star rating and people are happy, good performance, low cost, low volatility, I think this gives them some confidence to also invest there and be part of this community. And I think this is a big driver to help people to make the decisions who are not so familiar with investing or who think this is boring or complex to understand.
Yeah, because we're sort of living in this Amazon reviews, this TripAdvisor type society, right? And the Netflix on demand, we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. I think one of the things you're talking about there comes back to a guest we had on a previous show, who was the MD of eToro, which is exactly like you said. You can leave reviews. If you're not too confident, you can do those sort of things. I'm going to come to you, Anton, to sort of pick up on those points and give your angle on this.
Sure. So I maybe this is my theme of the day. I don't know. I've been thinking about this question slightly differently, which is like, what are the things people would prefer to do face to face? Because that's, I guess, the way we should be thinking about it as a digital first society. Now, I mean, my finances are pretty simple. I don't have anything particularly complex going on in my life, probably pretty similar to most of the people in sort of, my age group. And I can't think of really a single thing I'd like to do face to face to do with my finances, if I'm honest with you. Maybe a mortgage, signing off on a mortgage or something. I might like to do that face to face, but that equally probably not. Last time we did our mortgage renewal, we did that entirely remotely, actually, to be fair. So even that example, I just think there's 3 or 4 main drivers for that, right? There's as René already touched on, there's sort of like ease of use and accessibility. I want to be able to make my financial decisions at the point of time which suits me, wherever I am, on whatever I have to hand. Now, whether that's in 10 minutes as I'm walking between the tube and the train, whether that's sat on my sofa while I'm watching something on Netflix, whether that's, remembering I need to move some money between some accounts for some bills while I'm out and about, I'm exploring one of my COVID free walkings about in the local area. I want to have access to that capability wherever I am. And if I'm reliant on somebody else or I'm reliant on some face-to-face interaction, I can't do that. And so for me, it's kind of, what are the things I would rather do face to face? I think in the wealth management space, it's a little bit, so that's obviously some mainly like banking examples there. I think in the wealth management space, it's a little bit different, especially when you're talking about sort of high net worth or ultra high net worth individuals who are making some really quite large financial decisions. I can understand the reassurance of having a degree of human interaction with that, but that doesn't mean it needs to be face to face. Like video chat, video advice calls, those sorts of things, they're becoming a lot more prevalent, especially in today's time. How many wealth managers have we talked to over the past couple of months who've said how easily and quickly they've moved some of those face-to-face meetings to things like Zoom or GoToWebinar or Skype or Teams calls, whatever your preferred method of technology is, right? And so I think we're we're just kind of starting to get to the point where in a couple of years' time, we won't be asking the question, what things do people prefer to do digitally? They'll be like, what few things do people still prefer to do face-to-face? And I think no more better visualization of that than where we are in the moment, where, you know, kind of it's physically risky to go and do things face-to-face with somebody. And so I think that's gotten people out of their comfort zones. And, you know, we're talking about people who are receiving new cars delivered to them face-to-face where they've never test driven them before. And that's just not something that we would have done a year, well, definitely not 2 years ago, maybe not even a year ago. And maybe some of these trends will switch back to how they were in a post-COVID environment. But I just think that, you know, now's the time. If anything's going to give us this drive forward, it's now's the time to think, what do I actually need to do face to face? Why do I want to do it face to face? And can I replace that with a cleaner, with a safer, with a faster, with a more accessible, and also with a smaller environmental impact by doing some of these things digitally?
Thank you very much, Anton. And Johannes, what's your kind of opinion on this sort of piece? Just before we come to this last.
I'd actually like to rephrase Anton's question again. So I would actually ask, how can we even digitize the few remaining face-to-face interaction points? And I think this will happen much faster than we expect. So I think we still live in a financial world where a lot of interaction are not digitized, but the pace of digitization is even growing immensely. And I expect in a few years that there are really only a few couple of interactions will still be face-to-face driven. So I think it's the matter of accessibility. The new generations are demanding everything to be everywhere accessible digital interactions, and also the market is increasing because nowadays with all this data available, with all these tools available, normal people are entitled to do financial and to interact with the financial world a much greater share than it has been before. Nowadays, everyone can access data via the internet, where traders 20 years ago would have never had access to. So yeah, I think this is playing a very important influence as well.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so we've looked at the future. We've looked at sort of what's coming next, how people like to do things right now, the evolution of digitization or digitalization, whichever one you're going to think about. Now what I'd like to do is come on to, you know, what people can do now. Like what can they do in the next 5 years as a next step? If you're sat there in a firm right now and you're listening to this, you're listening to us talk, and you're starting to think you might want to do something, but you don't know which one to sort of pick, because there are lots of options of what you can do. René, let's come to you first. What could people do? What could people do first? What's this next step we could do in 5 years?
Yeah, so 5 years is quite a long range from now. If we go back 5 years from today, and there might happen a lot. So, but I would say they should start with the quick wins, the low-hanging fruits, where I think, as I mentioned earlier, getting paperless is one thing to really digitize things like a signature, or identify onboard new customers through video. So the last 3 months it was even not possible for them due to the current situation. But also from a convenience factor, it's one thing I would invest in as a company: digitally onboard the customers and introduce digital signature. The technology is there, the regulations are there. So this is one thing. Over the longer period, I think this is what Johannes mentioned, making use of the data they have from the customers. So banks, they have as many data, or most data, and very much insight, especially when they run the checking accounts and the current accounts of the customers. And they should make use of this data. And from a wealth management angle, I would say they should use this information for predictive analytics, to see what patterns were there in the market linked to certain events, and if there's the second corona wave or whatever, what are the upsides, the downsides, recovery periods, how should customers position, and to guide them and say, look, and even the younger generations, if they face such things, they might not have been there in the dot-com bubble back in the late 90s. And so if they have these data available and can make certain predictions, it might help them to do the right, or let's say, smart decisions how to invest their hard-earned money.
Thank you very much. Anton, I come to you with the same sort of question, really.
Sure. I mean, as I guess the person in the phone call whose job title involves the word data, I'm probably contractually obliged to mention data, even though René's already done a good job of talking about that. And I do really think that this is the biggest thing that firms can invest in. But what I would say, without kind of going over the same ground that René's already excellently talked through, which is that I think a lot of firms miss the point with this sometimes. You hear this phrase all the time that sort of, like data is the new oil. And it's a phrase I'm not the world's biggest fan of, because for me, it's not just about the data. It's about building a capability either within your business or through partnerships with other people to understand the data. Because you can have the world's most interesting, technologically advanced data processing system. You can capture all of the structured and unstructured data, all of your quantitative and qualitative data from everywhere. You can have, sentiment analysis going on left, right, and center. You can capture everything that happens. If you don't have people within your business or partners you can rely on to understand the changes to those data items and understand what that data means, there's no point capturing it. You're just building up a load of cost, a load of infrastructure, a load of data that you don't need. So one thing I would really say is, just to kind of follow up on that, is firms should definitely make sure that they have the technologies and the skill sets in place to sort of capture, store, and hold the data, but they also really need to focus on building within the business an understanding of that, or building with partnerships and understanding of that, and building a culture of data. I think that's the other thing. When we talked in our first session a little while ago, I talked about one of the important things for me was starting to see a transformation in the type of senior management and the boards of these firms, if they're really going to understand the next generation of customers. And I think it's the same thing that comes to mind for me for data. Like, we all talk about data-driven decisions, and every time you see anybody talking about a role or upcoming work that they're doing, it's all about making data-driven decisions. And that's a really popular and relevant and kind of, frankly, nothing new in the tech space. If you're working for a good company and they've been working smartly and diligently over the past 5 or 6 years, data-driven insights and data-driven decisions are going to be part of your daily language. And although wealth management firms and private banks are very used to looking at financial data and making astute and correct decisions about the planning of their finances and their customers' finances based on that data, there just isn't that history, or there isn't that kind of capability inside the business necessarily for understanding that more sort of ethereal data, that sort of behavioral data, that usage data, that sort of less structured, that more qualitative data. So I think that's a really important thing firms can do. Partner or build up internally the capability to understand and leverage that data, as well as just building up tech teams and data ops teams and buying interesting and expensive licenses for cool things like TensorFlow, that's open source, and big data libraries on GCP and large S3 buckets on Amazon. If you don't have the capability or the partners to help you understand that data, you're not really going to get anywhere with it.
Okay, Johannes, do you want to sort of pick up on this point too?
Sure, absolutely agree with René and Anton. Data is key, and we need to invest in analytics. I'd like to point to another topics in this environment. When we're talking about trends, I think it's very important that banks and wealth management firms become ecosystem players. So they really need to have strategies in place how to modularize their offering, how to take the ever-growing global ecosystem into account. So how to provide API-based services, which rely on strong modularized services. And when we're talking about APIs, it's not just APIs, it's also about the quality of APIs. And really successful players in this field are Stripe, Plate. So they really offer own ecosystems with a where everyone can dock in a matter of minutes, and this is, I think, something where many traditional companies lack strategies. The second point is, in terms of trends, I'd like to highlight new means of user experience as well, new channels, new patterns. One trend we're observing, for example, is conversational banking. So to approach new channels and include a lot of digital services in completely different behavior styles. That applies, for example, to the cases that I mentioned earlier.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, yeah, so we've seen a lot of different things that we can talk about. So why do you think then? I was going to say, why do you think people haven't started to do this already? And this leads on really perfectly to this slide, which is, what is hard about unlocking innovation in wealth management? So yeah, leading on perfectly from the last piece, really. René, let's come to you about this.
Am I supposed to pick only one? Because I see it's really they are all connected. So if I hire the wrong people, I have the wrong business culture, which gets hard to having a budget. And if there's no diversity, this relates again to the culture, and so there's no commitment to change. So this is if I walk through the whole thing.
This could be a flow diagram. This slide, right? We could have that flow diagram. So, do you want to take a part of the flow diagram? Well, actually, I think from your banking background, you must have hired some staff. So, do you want to take the first piece in this journey to the right place and talk about hiring?
Yeah. So, if you hire nowadays a banker, they need to have a complete different skill set than, let's say, 15, 20 years ago. And because lots of things have changed, they need to be tech affine, need to understand this side. But on the other side, empathy is something which is really needed for the few face-to-face moments you have, and to find the right balance between what you need to do face-to-face and but also have a good technical understanding. I think this is important, and so therefore they should have a good balance to decide where new technologies can support them to increase the service, to provide a better customer experience. But on the other hand, also which things still need to be done face-to-face. And I think especially in wealth management, this is also tightly linked to the complexity of the investment and the amount. So if I would say I want to structure a $3 million portfolio, this is something I would maybe not rather do with a fintech or challenger brand in a mobile app. There I would maybe sit together face-to-face, or at least in a video session, with a seasoned banker. If it is just investing, let's say, 50,000 in a robo-advisor and diversify a little bit a world portfolio, this is something which I could do maybe in technology. And this is also in terms of when you select the people and where you position them in your organization.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a bit of an opposite question here, which is, let's imagine that, well, we're in 2020. Let's imagine your firm has a hiring freeze right now. You don't have tech experts. You don't have programmers on board that can talk you through the latest technology innovations. Do you need to have absolute experts in technology internally, or can you ask consultants and other people to come in and help you?
I think you can get help from consultants, but I think what's always good is if your staff tries out the new things. So when it came up, I was opening a Revolut account because I wanted to experience this digital onboarding and see if it really is done in less than 10 minutes. So I took 13 minutes because the identification was only working in the second attempt. But I made it, and the promise was good. I use it from time to time, and so I think it's also to empower your staff to say, try it out, make your own picture, and then they understand this. And I think this is much better than just consume content from an external source. And so if you experience it on your own, then you can justify better. And then you can say, okay, I like this and that. For that, I prefer a personal interaction and so on. So I think people, they can do a lot by experience it themselves, and then make their own opinion. And but for certain topics, it's always good if you cannot have the people on your payroll, and to have just for a limited time boxed situation external specialists.
Thanks. Okay, so yeah, so that sort of pioneering spirit, or that kind of I'll try it out spirit, is obviously really important there. I think that's a great point to pick up on. So we've looked at hiring, which is the start of the journey. We're going to come to Johannes next for that. For the next part, what do you see that next part of unlocking innovation being?
Culture, definitely. So I think everything boils down to culture. Traditional firms need to have a strategy in place, how to change their culture and become, increase their digital DNA. I think that starts with the right people, right behavior, like René said. But I also think it starts with the right commitment in the top executive levels. So companies need to commit to digitization as being a top priority, top business priority. Must be anchored in the board of directors. So there must be a spokesperson responsible for this topic, and also responsible for establishing a strong culture all across a company. That facilitates, for example, practices like René said. That is something you could also push forward as a company, right? You can confront your staff with new innovations. You can do internal events, talk about innovative companies, other offerings in the market, and try to slowly get the understanding and the thinking into your organization.
Sure. So we're not talking with business culture and cultural change. We're not talking about spending a lot of money. This is not an investment in sort of, spend X money and you can buy culture. Are you saying then it's more about this incremental change and leading from the board level, a cultural revolution almost, if it's needed?
It's both. Of course, companies need to have the right strategies, and accordingly they need to have budgets to execute these strategies to become digital. But that's not a problem, I think. Maybe in the market there are a lot of players who have too small budgets to this, but I think the greater challenge is that the companies actually manage to change their culture, and that's a huge challenge.
Excellent. And just before we go into a wrap up, let's go to Anton. What do you sort of see? What do you want to sort of pick from this board?
Sure. So I think between Johannes and René, we've answered basically all of them in various different degrees. Because I think you can't really talk about diversity without talking about business culture. And I think for me that aspect of business culture and commitment to change and diversity, alongside the hiring people and policy part and the budget to do so, they all, as René said at the start, they all kind of go hand in hand, right? So I think it's about making sure that you have a kind of diverse range of people throughout the organization. I think we're in a time that's proving to us how important that diversity can be. And I think I think by having a really interesting mix of people and backgrounds, ages and experiences, ethnicities, gender, sexual orientation, whatever it is, making sure that you have a diverse culture within your business. It automatically increases the innovation, because when you have a company that has mostly the same sorts of people with the same sorts of background, the same sort of experience, you end up with like an echo chamber. So even if you have an innovation team, or you have an innovation function, or you have an innovation culture within the business, if that culture isn't filled with enough diversity and diversity across all of those levels, ages, experiences, backgrounds, all of that area, I'm not talking about one particular type of diversity, I'm talking about just having a diverse workforce. If those people are involved in the innovation process, and ideally a company is an innovative company, as opposed to just having like a time box, sandbox innovation team that produces innovation theatre. We're talking about genuinely innovative companies that take that as part of their target operating model, is to be innovative and disruptive. You're going to get better results out of it naturally, because people have different experiences. If we were to ask 25 people from really diverse backgrounds the most important thing about money to them, and their experiences about money and what they want to do with it, you would get really different answers. Sure, you're going to get some common trends and you're going to get some common themes there, but if you ask those 25 people what the most important thing about money is to them, you're going to get different answers. Whereas if you get 25 people who look the same, have the same background, have the same education area, grew up in the same places, have the same familial experiences, have the same sort of lineage in their background, there might be one or two differences, but they're not going to be that different. And so you might be innovating in the same areas, but you're never really going to be truly innovating across the board, because you're always kind of led by that echo chamber you have within the business of those same sorts of people thinking about their same experiences. We're creatures of habit and we're creatures of experiences. We learn by doing things, and we learn by our past experiences. And so if you only have people who have the same or similar past experiences in your business, you're just flat out not going to be as innovative. So I think while diversity is a really important topic in the business generally, and it's a really topical and important subject for society at the moment, I think it's also really key to innovation, because just like I said, if you have the same people and the same experiences and the same way of thinking, you're only going to be able to do so much surface innovation without that different sort of opinion.
Thank you very much, Anton. Okay, so the series, is coming to a close. Had a great time doing this. Just going to come to each of our panelists as normal to wrap up their thoughts from the show, and just say a little bit about themselves before we go. So let's stick with tradition and go to René. What are you going to take away from this show, and maybe from past shows as well?
Yeah, so overall, I would thank all the involved people, the panelists from the various series, you, Andrew, as a organizer and host. And I think I was not attending all of the episodes, unluckily, but it was very interesting also to see the various firms and companies, what they can contribute to change society, behavior, new ways of work, investing, finance and banking. And so this is really interesting to see. And with the current situation, we are all in globally. I think this was another accelerator for the entire topic, and it made people aware that things have to change and will change even faster than expected. And so I'm looking forward what all will come, and also how we as a CREALOGIX can also support this transition, and also together with the other companies in an ecosystem to provide then value to the clients, to the customers, to the business people. And will be really interesting if we look back in 5 years how things have evolved, what we've predicted, and then looking forward to this journey.
Thank you very much. And maybe in 5 years' time we can all sit down, same panel. I'll be a lot grayer, and we can see about how our predictions have panned out. Well, thank you very much, René. It's been great to have you on the series. Johannes, same to you. Small wrap up for
Sure, pleasure. Yeah, I think it was very interesting seeing all this panelists discussing about recent developments in the wealth management space and predicting the future. I think what we've learned overall is basically that the digitization pace has even accelerated due to the coronavirus situation, for example. A lot of businesses and services are digitizing much faster now. I think the importance to providing strong digital and innovation strategies for traditional players is massive. We are entering a decade where we will see huge consolidation in the financial market. Raising brands, new players will be established much more. So the industry landscape will change completely, and some of the traditional players will die, a lot of them, I think, and some will be successful. And I think the decision criteria will be whether they bring the right digital strategies, whether they can incorporate a digital DNA, whether they will manage to focus on user-centric solutions and optimize the customer experience of their financial services.
Thank you very much, Johannes. And Anton.
Sure. So firstly, just wanted to thank all of the panelists who've taken part, all of our audience and listeners, those of you that have enjoyed these. Hopefully, it's been an enlightening topic that we've had today and over the course of the series. Thanks to Andrew, obviously, for hosting, and Mr. George Bailey, who's the kind of marketing mastermind behind the scenes, who's been proudly sharing his screens and his PowerPoints and running the Mentimeters, proving to everyone how important marketing is to a business and how much fun it can be as well. I've really enjoyed the communications that I've had both within these sessions and also to people who've reached out, who've watched sessions and interacted with me. I've really enjoyed our conversations. And I think it's also like my summary would be that over the past, 2020 has been a bit of a tough year, right, for most of us so far. It's been an interesting one, and hopefully if we do look back on this in 5 years' time, we'll be like, remember that time you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't see your family, and you couldn't hang out in person with people? Hopefully those will be what we're talking about then, not that we're still in that position. And I think mainly the kind of the theme or the takeaway for me that we've had so far is we've had a lot of firms talking and we've had a lot of people in the industry talking, and we're all largely aligned in what we're saying, which is, kind of, we know what firms should be doing and we know what's important and what keys we can use to unlock innovation and unlock digitalization. And I think we can all agree how important it is to businesses. So now it's the time to go ahead and kind of knuckle down and get on with it. And I think that's really what we'll be able to look back on in the next 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 years, will be the firms who we're still talking to and still talking about and still pulling up great examples, will be the ones that take this time to really take the opportunity to kind of double down, start getting on with it, start making the changes, start bringing the diversity into the company, start reorganizing your culture, start learning from data, start building those organizational structures and really making a difference and making digitalization happen. Those will be the firms that we continue to talk to, and those will be the firms that we look back in 5 years and be like, wow, they really got it. They really took it on board and they really got on with it. And then the firms that won't will be the ones we look back and be like, and that's what happens if you don't do it. I guess that would be my summary.
Thank you very much, Anton. Well, yes, all that's left for me to say really is thank you so much to our panelists today, and thank you very much for attending the shows, what you've been able to do, and listening to this episode as well. And we offer many different things here at CREALOGIX. If any of the topics have struck a chord with you, we can help you explore that more. You can get in touch with us at CREALOGIX.com, or you can see our first names and last names here on the screen. It's first name dot last name at CREALOGIX.com. And you get in touch with any of us and talk about these different topics from a digital standpoint. We can really help you to roll out this innovation and the new way of doing things digitally, whether you want to take a small step or whether you want to take a massive leap. We're here to be that consultative partner for you. We also offer private workshops for wealth management firms, as you can see on the screen now, everything from strategy to building and that system of engagement. So yeah, it's been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure hosting this series. We will return at some point in the future to do some other webinars. On the email you guys are going to get, there is also details of webinars that some of our esteemed colleagues are going to be participating in. There's certainly some that I'm going to be joining. Anton's going to be involved in some panels very, very shortly, so I'm going to be listening intently. Well, thank you very much, and obviously thank you for George behind the scenes, who you can't see today, and I don't think you've ever seen actually. So yeah, there he is. There he is. Thank you very much, George. It's great to have you organising the background and keeping us all going and safe through this series. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I've been your host, Andrew Gough. It's been an absolute pleasure. Goodbye.